Welcome, students. This is your second class of phonetics. Today we'll be doing a lot of review of symbols as well as learning some new symbols. We'll also do a great deal of practice with those symbols because that's what you need to get them down. So we will write, because sometimes the shapes are a little tricky. They're not your standard letters, these symbols. We will write them as well as learn to use them correctly for consonants and vowels of American English. And then we will identify these sounds and use their symbols properly in some minimal pairs. We'll look at some poetry to find examples, and we'll also write some link winks, which are kind of a fun word game with rhyming words that we can use to practice these symbols. So as we saw last week, there are some symbols, in particular many of the consonant symbols, that are very, very intuitive. They're exactly what you would expect. So for sounds like p, b, t, d, k, and g, you know those. They're gimmies. Now you'll notice that we don't use a C in transcription. C is used for some languages, but not for English. So stick with the K for the k sound. M and N, M and N, just as you already know. Then F, V, S, Z, and H, again, just what you already know. And then L, R, and W, also sounds that you already know, no problem there. So you've got a lot of the consonants covered already. And the nice thing about the consonants is that the symbols that you don't already know tend to make sense. So let's take a look at those. And please write along with me as we practice writing these symbols. Okay, so first one there, one of my favorite sounds. And as you can see, it looks like an N with a G tail. And so it represents the ng sound. So although we usually write that ng sound using two letters, the N and the G, in fact, it's really only one sound. So this is how you would write the N. We call it the engma. You make your N and then just finish it up with a G tail. So you'll be able to remember that nicely. Now our next two sounds are both typically represented by TH in spelling. We have th, which we call theta, and I'm imagining you've encountered that before, so that's in a word like thin. We also have another symbol called eth, which represents other words that are spelled using TH, but this is the beginning of words like the, this, that, these, those. So listen to the difference between thin and this. It's not a huge difference. The tongue's still in the same place, but for this one, it's more like a D, and this one is more like a T or an S. Okay, so we've got our engma, ng, theta, and eth. Now, for almost anything spelled with an SH, a sh sound, we have an elongated S, which we sometimes can call esh. So for a word like fish, the sh at the end, that would be this symbol. Now there's another one. So if we were writing this on lined paper, this is where the line would be. And I'm going to put a close counterpart of sh, known as zh, right next to it, because that's another one where it's important to see where it sits on the line. So you've got the Z part, so it's really a Z with a tail. So you've got the Z part, and then you bring the tail. And that's giving you a zh sound, like you might find in a word like leisure or Asia. Not very often at the beginning of words. You know, the old movie star Zsa Zsa Gabor, her name would start with that symbol. Now building on these two, we have two other sounds for ch and j. So the ch sound is it's one sound, but we represent it using two symbols, ch. So that would be at the beginning of a word like check, or at the end of a word like check. Okay, and then its close counterpart, j, as in jam or jelly, is like this. And again, that's one sound. We kind of think of it as a sound represented by a J in spelling, but it's one sound that we write with two symbols. So, ng, th, the, sh, zh, ch, and j. Then this one gets everybody. So when we want to write a word like, transcribe a word like yellow, even though you'd think the Y would be a great symbol to use, and it is a great symbol, in phonetic transcription we actually use a J instead. So if you're transcribing a word like yellow, it would begin with this J. And the reason is, if you speak French, there's a vowel in French, the U vowel, that gets to use the Y. So we have to use the J for a Y sound. And then the last challenging consonant for us to look at is the glottal stop. The glottal stop is a great sound. We don't typically write it though, unless we're writing a word like Hawaii and using little apostrophe to represent the glottal stop. So this is what a glottal stop looks like. It can be, it really looks like a question mark with a line at the bottom, or some fonts, a sans serif font will show it just like that. So those are both ways to write that glottal stop sound. And that's a sound you're going to hear in a word like uh-oh, right? It's not a smooth oh, it's uh-oh. So those little catches in there are the glottal stop. Okay, that is our set of challenging consonants. Take a moment, write these, because you're going to need practice doing that. As you write them, you might find, if this is how your memory works, you might find that you will be able to remember them better. Okay. Now, let's see what you remember. So I'd like for you to think about, this might be a place where you want to pause and look at the overhead and think of your answers. So that's an option for you as you watch this video. But right now, I'll give you the answers to this. So here's our first word. We want to know what the consonant is for the underlined area. So this word is measure, measure. So this is a place where I would want you to use the zh, zh. So that's like in leisure and Asia, measure. Okay, now our next word is singer, singer. So for this one, I hope that your mind said that's ng. So this is a place to use the engma, the ng. Now, I want to point out now, while I'm thinking of it, there's a big difference between a word like singer and this, your finger. So even though they're spelled pretty much the same, except for the beginning, in singer, there's just ng. But if you say finger, there's ng and a G. So that's something that often trips people up. But so the ng may be followed by a g. It may be followed by a k, such as in a word like sink. That would have the ng and a k. Okay. Next word, one. Well, I've not actually underlined anything, but there is a sound there at the beginning, a w sound. And so that's one of our intuitive symbols, so that'll be a W at the beginning of one. All right, now region, region. Now ask yourself, does it sound just like the middle of measure, or is it different? Measure, region. Oh, it's different. So for region, we would use this j symbol because it includes both the j part and the j part together. Then our last word here is uh-oh, and I kind of gave this one away in the previous slide, but this would be a place where if we want to indicate the sound in between the two halves of uh-oh, also at the beginning of uh-oh, we would use our glottal stop. So we've got the j, the ng, w, j, and the glottal stop. Okay. All right, here's our next set of words to practice with. And again, if you'd like to look at these, pause, and write out your answers, that would be a good way to go about it. So we've got bath, bathe, York, Hawaii, if we say it like someone who's just been to Hawaii, and ankle. All right, so let me do the first one. So this is bath. Does that sound like the th in thin or the one in this? I hope you think it sounds like the one in thin. So for bath, we would use our theta. Th. Now, for the related verb bathe, bathe, think about that one. Does that sound like thin or does it sound like this? And I hope you'll agree it sounds like the one in this. So this is the curly D with a line through it for the. Okay, next word is York, spelled with a Y, but if you'll remember to get that y sound in phonetic transcription, we need to use the J. So York would start with a J. Then Hawaii, another one for you to practice the glottal stop. This is Hawaii is one of the few places where anyone writes the glottal stop in any sort of way, and that's with the little apostrophe thing. Last word here is ankle. Okay, so think back to singer and finger as we decide what to do with ankle. So we definitely have a ng sound, so we've got our angma, ankle. So I hope you also hear a K there, ankle. So those are the consonants for this set of words, th, the, y, and nk. All right, let's step it up a little with these words. So you can take a look at these, try to decide for yourself what symbols you'll use for each of the underlined sounds or set of sounds. Sometimes these are a little tricky and there are multiple sounds represented by what I've underlined. As I told you in the first class, we really can't depend on spelling. Spelling is really there just to not help us. So we have to really depend on our ears for what we hear and how we say a word. Okay, so for these, I'm going to go first down and then across for the next ones. Okay, so our first word there is acquittal. So I've underlined the qua. So this is an area where you'll find KW, qua, represents that quite well. So KW. Our next word is amateur. Now some people like to be fancy and say amateur. We're going to do it as if it's amateur. And that will be the ch sound, amateur, like that. Our next word is aquarium. Something in common with acquittal. So that's also going to be a KW, qua. Last word in that column is astonish. Sh. So that's an SH. So that will be our esh sound, an elongated S. Okay, that covers our first column. Then we go on to our middle column where we've got the word beauty. Now, of course, we're going to need a B, but what is often forgotten is that there's a y sound in there in beauty. If you don't include the ya, you'll be transcribing booty, but you want to do beauty. So there's a J, bya, and that's a possible cluster for us at the beginning of a word in English. Bureaucracy, also the same thing, the bya. So whenever you see a BU, be on alert that it, spelling BU, be on alert that it might be a bya that is representing for you. Okay, chimpanzee, ch at the beginning, like chicken or check. So I'm hoping you would like to use the cha for that. Then our last word in this column is chromium. Now it's spelled CH, but it's not chromium, it's just chromium. So that would be a KR. So again, remember that looking at the spelling is important to know what word's being represented, but very often the letters that are used can throw you off, and try to not pay too much attention to them. Okay, first word in the last column is crimson or crimson. Some people say crims with a Z, but other people might say it with an S, crimson. So this is a case where you would need to decide on how you say it, whether you say crimson or crimson, or how the person speaking says it. So that's some variation that we notice. There's neither one is right or wrong. It just depends upon how the person says it. Okay, next word, compassion. Sh. This is a pretty funny spelling of a sh sound where it's SSI, but it's the same thing. It's the sh sound. So we'd use our elongated S, the sh. Cultural. Now that's one, cultural. So it's not cultural, that would use this one, but it's cultural. So we'd use our ch symbol again. And our last one here is digestion, j, j. So that's like judge, so that would be the D and the j. I hope you're feeling like the symbols make sense. I hope you're feeling like you're making progress. We'll keep doing practice. All right, here's your next set of consonants to practice on, next set of words. So again, if you want to pause here, write out what sounds you think should be in the underlined area, you can do that. So we've got Snickers, youth, crunchy, major, coupon, mutual, natural, tether, jog, wrangle, measure, and rye. All right, like before, I'll start going down and then head over. Okay, Snickers. Now that's spelled with a CK, and you know I keep telling you not to pay attention to the spelling. So it's not, even though there's a C and a K, it's not a very like extra long Snickers. It's just Snickers. So what you would use there would simply be a K, leaving aside that C, which is sort of there for effect, I guess. Now we'll move down to youth. Okay, spelled with a Y, but as I told you before, French took the Y symbol, so we use our J for the Y of youth. Okay, crunchy, crunchy. This is one that's like the beginning of chicken, ch, so we'd use the ch there, crunchy. And last one in this line, spelled with a J, but sounds like j, major, major. So that would be one with the D and the j, major. Okay, now, I think you're probably all going crazy for our middle at the top there, coupon. A lot of people say coupon, but a lot of people have grandmothers who like to say coupon, and it drives us nuts. So if you say coupon, you would just use a K. But if you're transcribing someone who actually says coupon, that would be where you use your J again. Coupon, right? Without the J, coupon. With it, coupon. All right, next word, mutual. Mutual. So we know an M is needed, but here's another one of those words where you've got a U. Is it mutual? No, it's mutual. So here's another place we need the J, mutual. Okay, our next word is natural. Natural. So ch. So this would be another ch in natural. And then at the bottom there we've got tether, like playing tetherball. So think about that TH. Is it more like, is it tether, like the th in thin, or is it tether, like the in this? And I hope you'll agree it's more like in this. So that will be our curly D eth sound for tether, like in tetherball. Okay, last column, we've got jog, j. So that'll be a D with the j, jog. Okay, now wrangle. So I've said a few things already about the ng and adding a G or a K. So think about what you do here, wrangle. We definitely have our ng, wrangle, okay? So this will be a place where we add the g. And just to contrast for you, wrangle, we're dealing with cows, versus clothes that someone sat on, wrinkle. So wrangle, wrinkle. Wrinkle would use a K, wrangle has got the G. Okay, next one, measure, measure. So that's like Asia or leisure. So we use our j there. And our last one's kind of a trick, rye. So there's a W written there, but in fact, nobody says a W. So this would, the beginning of rye would simply be an R. Surprise! Another box of words for you to choose the consonants from. So here we have Egyptian, gestation, Hercules, mingle, nonchalant, omniscient, orthodox, pasteurized, pathology, quantify, rebellious, and weather. So, now's the time you can pause, think about how you would indicate those sounds, or come along with me and do it as I do. So first one, we've got Egyptian, a J, Egyptian. So that should be J for Egyptian. Next one, gestation. Oh, same pattern, the J as well for gestation. Next we have a Greek hero, Hercules. Hercules, so definitely a K, and yeah, we've got a U there in the spelling, so sometimes that makes you add a Y sound. And in this case, it does. Hercules, so that would be a K. Mingle, mingle, so we definitely have the engma. And also, also a G, mingle. Okay, mingle. So ja, kya, nga. Nonchalant, nonchalant. So that's like the sh in fish. So that would be this elongated S for nonchalant. Omniscient. So there are a lot of letters there, but it's still represented just by the elongated S, the sh. Orthodox. Now this is a tricky one. Often we've been finding that multiple letters might be represented, multiple letters in the spelling might be represented by just one symbol. This goes the other way. So in orthodox, what's that X doing for us? Orthodox. Is it one sound? X. No, it's actually two sounds. So in this instance, the X represents KS. So often when X is at the end of a word, like in fix, it gives you two sounds that we need to represent with two symbols. Pasteurized. Pasteurized. Now this is another word that has some variation that you'll hear. Some people say pretty clearly pasteurized with an S. Others, like me, might say pasteurized with a sh at the beginning. So it's going to be either pasture, or it might be, if people say it a little bit closer together, sure, with a sh and a ch all together. So that's something that you will probably start listening for and find that there are a lot of cases where something that you think is an S is actually pronounced more like a sh. For example, when you go into the T at Park Street, a lot of people say street instead of just street. So you can listen for that. Okay, final column here, pathology. So there's a th, and you want to decide whether it's a th of thin or a the of this. And I hope you'll decide it's a th, pathology, like that with a theta. Quantify, we've seen some like this before. That's a qua, KW. Rebellious, rebellious. So definitely an L, and you'll also want a ya, rebellious. So it's not rebellious, but rebellious. So you need the ya. And last one there is weather, weather. So again, decide, is it the of this or th of thin? And I hope you will decide it's the of this in weather.